Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming for my session. I'm going to talk about what happened for hackers breaking log and SIEM products. My name is Mehmet and I'm managing partner of the product. It's a Switzerland-based company and I've been working in the information security area for more than 10 years. And basically I'm doing security research on the products and the pentesting stuff. We have webpage pentest.blog. We are releasing our articles and the experience in here with the pentesting team. And here's the Twitter account that you can follow me. Okay, so today's outline, we will start talking about the log and the SIEM. And then we will see the possible attack vectors and of course the vulnerability that we found on the different products. And I have 3 different demonstrations for you guys today. So SIEM and the log management products, it's just basically finding a needle in the haystack. Those kind of products gives you ability to collect activities from almost everywhere, and then it becomes easier to understand what's happening in your organization. And finally, you will be able to detect the cyber attacks as they are happening. This is basically what we see when you are using the SIEM products. Let's say you have lots of devices and services. You have web application, firewalls, antivirus system, IPS, IDS, routers, switches, databases, application servers. All those systems are generating logs in real time. So by using collectors, you will be able to collect all those log files into the single location, and then using the correlation, data mining, and the other stuff inside of those kind of products, you will be able to understand what's happening in real time. So the most easiest way to understand those kind of products is related to the understanding use cases of the SIEMs. Let's say someone managed to access to one of your internal servers and want to exfiltrate the data to the internet. So it could be actually DNS tunneling could be used for that purpose. So it is very important to understand the loss of DNS resolution for a domain that you haven't seen in your life. You need to get notified when this type of things happening in your network. Also, another example is that there's someone performing the brute force and the network enumeration from the internet, and one of your servers, after some time, one of your servers wants to connect back one of those attackers' IP addresses. So it is it's a potential successful exploitation after a scanning and the enumeration. So it could be very useful to get notified when those kind of activities started happening for your organization. This is why we are using those kind of products. So let's look at the attack scenarios against the SIEM and the log management products. This is my favorite. Actually, we managed to execute whole step during the penetration test. We have attacker and we have company in here. And the first step, attacker detects the WordPress page of the company. So he writes a command to the one of the posts, and this command contains hacker.com, which is obviously under the control of the attacker. So administrator reads the commands and try to visit this web page. So the administrator browser sends a HTTP request to the hacker.com, and this is the way how you can redirect him back to where you want. So we are redirecting user back to the blog.company.com with the S parameter with one of the most famous cross-site scripting payload. Actually, there is no such a vulnerability in the WordPress site, but the web application firewall realized this payload and it will send the full HTTP request to the SIEM and the log management products. So if you manage to access to one of those products, you will be able to see the full HTTP request where you can see the valid session from the cookie. So we are forcing user to visit web page with a known payload, which will share the full HTTP request to the SIEM site. So if we manage to access one of those devices, you will be able to see valid sessions, maybe. Another attack scenarios is related to the accessing isolated networks, because SIEMs or the log management products have got privileges in your network. That means those kind of products need to access almost everywhere, so it can, access all the log files and trace what's happening in your network. So if the attacker managed access to employee network and then successful exploitation of the SIEM products can lead to access almost everywhere by performing network pivoting attack. Okay, so it is time to talk about our methodologies because we've been performing security research on those kind of products, and those are the basic steps what we are doing during the research. To be honest, we are starting with reading the documentation because there's a lot of user information you can use during the exploitation. And then we try to understand the product's feature, because when you manage to find a vulnerability inside of the product, then you can be able to exploit one of the core features. I'm going to show you a very, very cool example about this. And then you need to find a free trial of the product, because you don't want to do this kind of operation with the black box pen testing. Getting a free trial can be tricky. Sometimes we are finding ourselves in a situation where we are having, meeting with the sales team, but somehow, if you manage to get a free trial and then you need to find access to the terminal of this box, so you most of the time will be facing with the hardening stuff on the operating system. For example, you're not going to be able to know what is the root user's password, but you need to log in with the root so you can enumerate all the services and the configurations. After you finish the enumeration within the box, you need to define the possible attack vector, which means you need to focus on the execution flow, and then you need to start to find the vulnerabilities. Our first case was with the Alienwald USM product. Actually, we met with this product during the pen test, and we realized that that instance was using older version, not the latest one. So our idea was very simple. We will download the latest version of this product from the vendor page, and then we need to find the older version as well, so we can understand the code changes, because we assume that there should be important security fixes. So we downloaded the latest version of the product from the vendor page, but we need the older version as well, but the company doesn't provide it through their web page. So by using some sort of Google hacking techniques, we find their CDN services where they are releasing every single version inside of this FTP server. So we download all of the older versions, and we installed both versions into our lab. This is the initial screen of this product. So there is a jailbreak system functionality which gives you directly the root access to the machine. By having the root access to the machine, we managed to download all the source codes. So after that, we took out source code from those boxes. By using IDEs, we managed to understand the differences. So by reading differences, this was the first vulnerability that we've seen. The older version was using the unserialized function, and the newer version was using the GSND code. This is the obvious PHP object injection vulnerability. But as you know, the PHP object vulnerabilities depends on the classes who have backup and the destruct function, but we haven't seen any of those kind of classes. So we just take this vulnerability node and keep continuing reading source code. This is the second issue that we realized. Actually, this issue was exist on the latest version at the time of this research. There's a session log check called almost everywhere, and if you look at the log check definition in here, it looks at the user agent. If the user agent equals to the AV report schedule, it just returns true. That means there is no authentication in here. Yeah, also they are saying the reason for some of taking reports, the session could be expired from the command line. Okay. Our third finding was related to the client IP address. It's just looking for another HTTP request. Either if it sees the x4.4, it just takes the value itself as an IP address, because the Alienwald USM records all the taken actions through the administrator interfaces. Okay, let's go into the details. This is where we are detected the unserialized function call. We have lots of user supplied variable in here. We have type, IDs. If ID didn't exist or empty, we have more user supplied parameters in here. And then we have the validation over the data taken from the user. So it's just looking for the V type must be text, height must be digits, blah, blah, blah. If you look at this get asset filter function, we are seeing the vinfo asset, which is also taken from the directly user, goes for the get asset filter functions. That is the reason why we need to understand what's happening inside of this function. So if you look at this function, keep that in your mind, we are controlling the second function parameter. So if you look at the second function parameter, it assets, and it goes another function inside of the array. So we need to look at get asset filter function as well. And if you look at here, we are seeing that the asset, if it's empty, if it's empty, then use all underscore assets. If it's not, just use the data itself. This is very, very important point for us because we know that the asset underscore asset means something important to the application itself. Okay, so we managed to complete the execution until this line. We need to read rest of the source code in order to understand what's happening with that unserialized call data. Here's what's happening in the next. It uses switch statement, and we have type parameter in here. As you can remember, it is also under the user control. And if it's equal to alarm, and then it calls validation again, which we can easily exploit it by using our magical user agency string. And then it looks for the data itself. And if it is empty, then use max. If it's not empty, use the data itself. And then this operating being used by the SQL query and validation. So basically, we have SQL injection in here. So the SQL injection, okay, we have SQL injection, we have authentication bypass. So let's continue to exploitation of the SQL injection. So this is our initial payload. We are commenting out the rest of the queries. Anyway, this is how we can trigger the SQL injection. Our type is alarm, and we put all assets data to the asset variable. We are putting height equal to 1 because there is an input validation about that parameter, and here our payload, and of course our magical user agent. So, okay, we're going to exploit the SQL injection, and one of the way we use for this purpose is this payload. It's just an error-based technique. When we send this payload to the server, we start getting this response. This product also have built-in web application firewall. It detects our payload and stops the execution. So we decided to change SQL injection attacks to something else, and we use big integer error. It's just exclamation mark, very, very important for this type of technique. So we changed our query to something else and resent the payload, but this time input validation blocked us, and it says that you cannot use exclamation mark. Okay, we need to find something else. So we come up idea with the extract value, and it does exactly the same thing with another way. And this is the way how we manage to bypass web application firewall. We are just getting the data from the users table, the first row, and the password field. And as you can see, that is the password. Okay, here's the things that we've done so far. We find out what version, we took out the source code, performed source code analysis, and identified 3 different vulnerabilities. And then we realized the web application firewall, we managed to bypass it, and here we are. We have SQL injection. But how can we convert it to the remote code execution? This is really, really important because it was this penetration testing was the remote test from the external world, so we need to get a root access to this machine so we can perform the internal scanning and the other steps of the post-exploitation area. Okay, so this is one of the best features that I love for the SIEMs. Most of the SIEM solutions are capable to execute operating system command or call your custom script when a certain type of event being fired. So our idea is very simple. We're going to extract administrator session from the database by exploiting the SQL injection. And then we're going to access to the management interface by using this token. And then we create a SIEM actions that executes the operating system command, which will be our payload. And then we create a policy that will be triggered when the failed SSH authentication occurs. You can change these policies to something else. We just try to go with the SSH authentication, and then we're going to bind this policy to the action, start the listening on the server side, perform SSH authentication with invalid credentials, which will trigger this policy, and eventually we're going to have the session from the server. Here's a demonstration about all the steps. We implemented the Metasploit module for all those steps, and here's how it works. There you go. Yeah, basically, we are having the data from the database by exploiting SQL injection, and then we are creating our action, which contains our payload, and then we are creating the policy, and then performing the SSH authentication with invalid credentials, which will trigger all those other steps. Okay. Our second case. It was another internal penetration test, and we have found this product, and we tried to log in with admin, and it just worked. But it was the beginning of our journey. Okay, we downloaded the latest version of the product from the vendor page again, and we open up all the XML files because you can see the endpoints and the associated classes definition. And we started looking at the spatial keywords like a run, like a execute, because all the developer loves to use those kind of keywords for the endpoints when they are executing queries or calling the background job, which we can, have a very sweet vulnerabilities in here. We detect that the run query.do endpoint, which is not a bug, I think it's just a feature. It gives you ability to execute SQL query, the database of this product. Okay, so we started thinking about one question: how those products manage to get the log files from the servers? There should be two major approaches for this one. You may perform authentication, access to the machine, and then get all the data that you want. Or you can stay where you are and install the agent onto the server, and this agent gonna send all the information again that you need. So this product was using the authentication. It's just, going to the machine and then reading all the data that he wants. So if you look at the details of one host, define it inside of the product, we are seeing the IP addresses, username, but password field was empty. But it should be some sort of password into the database, because otherwise it is not possible to access the machine by using those credentials. So we find the table names who is storing all those information, and we execute this query. And we return the password, but it doesn't show the actual data again. So we started thinking about how this is even possible, even with directly getting results from the database, and yet applications still able to don't show the password itself. That was the question we are asking ourselves. So the idea is there should be some sort of blacklisting in here. And the application executes query onto the database and retrieves the columns as an array, and it looks for the spatial keywords like a password. If you are retrieving the password column, it changes the data. It must be on the way to do this. So we changed the column name. Password as product bypass. So it just gives us what we want. So I believe everyone in the audience thinking about this is the password. This is exactly what we thought at the beginning. And we jump into the PSExec module of the Metasploit and provide all the information and receive the authentication error because those credentials was invalid. If you look at the data itself, it looks like MD5, but it can't be MD5, otherwise you're not going to be able to get the plain text password from the hash functions. It's just a one-way functions. So the problem is the encryption. We navigate to the add host module and realize that the add host form in the URL. And I have, lots of developer friends, and they just, continue to follow the naming conventions. So if there is an add host form class, there should be add host action, who is responsible for the action of these forms. So we just try to look at all the classes in order to find out the add host actions class. And here's what we found. Here's the password taken from the user input, and it goes for the encryption. But there's one very important details in there. We haven't seen any private key so far. If you look at the definition of the encryption encryption class, we are seeing this key in here. Mlight encrypt decrypt. So this product uses static private key for the encryption. We just took out that jar file and create our own Java project and pass the data that we've taken from the product and call the decrypt function. Here's the password that we want. The rest of them is very, very easy to continue with the test hash, ps exec. Yeah, cool. This is the third product that we met during the penetration test. Actually, we managed to get demo of this product from directly the vendor page, vendor web page, and we gained access to the root session, root terminal, and started looking at all the configuration files. This is the configuration files taken from the Nginx. If you look at the definition, we are seeing that if the location ends with the PHP, then send this request to the local socket. So instead of spending our time to understand everything, we just try to focus on to find the location of the PHP file. So this is the function that we execute for this purpose. We just look at the OTP folder because everyone loves to put their files under this folder, and we try to get the PHP session ID string inside of all the files under this directory. So the returned data tells us that there is a logsign API folder who has lots of Python implementation. It's under that folder, and the logsign API means that there should be some sort of APIs, and we love APIs. So we started looking at the content of the Python project, and we started seeing the Flask application. It is mostly used for the API implementation, and it says if the request comes for the index underscore status, then perform the authentication and then execute these function calls. This is how we can read this source code. Okay, we keep reading all the definition, and we realize that endpoint log browse and validate, and the method must be post. And I don't see any annotation in here. We call those kind of definition is annotations. Authenticate annotation is responsible for the authentication, but the developers just forget to call that annotation in here. That means we can access this endpoint without having any valid sessions. If you keep reading the source code, it takes the post data, just the body of the HTTP post request, and it puts the data into the data variable. And then it just looks for is screen open. It's just looking for do I have any running process right now? And then here's what we need to understand. It just gets the file parameter from the JSON object because it just loads data to the JSON call. And it then calls the command line operation in here. It just called the CLI application, define it for the client system, and then our parameter directly taken from the unauthenticated user passed to this command without performing any validations. So we have command injection in here. Here's the application interface. There's a lot of information about the Acro's infrastructure. As a second step, we upload the second payload, which is access to the local database and looks for all the data and then remove it. And if you refresh the page, you're not going to see anything else. This is very important because those kind of products are very, very important for the organization. They are just looking for these screens where they understand what's happening. They're going to look at those and use those kind of application when they realize something bad happening. So if we manage to access those systems, we can become invisible because we can, we know our own IP address and we can remove all the data related to us. Thank you very much for listening to our research.